For today's Scholarcation, we will answer the question, what are the different sections of the United States Constitution? To answer that, we'll go on an adventure. So let's call this trip a scholar venture. So what's the plan? In order for this Scholarcation to be a scholar venture, we gotta switch things up a bit. So, I download a Constitution app on my phone, I attach my GoPro camera to my bike, and I'm going to tour Washington, D.C. During my adventure, I'll discover the different sections of the Constitution while also visiting the 3 branches of government set up by the Constitution. Let's take a look at our route. So we'll start over here at the United States Capitol, home of Congress and the legislative branch. And then, we'll head on over to the White House, home of the executive branch. But in order to have a better scenic view on this fun scholar venture, let's take the more scenic route. Let's go through the National Mall. After we check out the White House and the home of the executive branch, let's head to Article 3, home of the judicial branch and the Supreme Court. Now, before we get started on this scholar venture, let's do some quick review and remind ourselves of the events that led to the creation of the Constitution. The colonists were frustrated as the rule of the British government tightened its reins on the 13 colonies. So the colonists declared their independence from England in the Declaration of Independence. But remember, they declared their independence as 13 free and independent states, with each state being its own sovereign country. They created a new government called the Articles of Confederation, which turned out to be a disaster. So, delegates from the 13 states met in Philadelphia to try and fix the Articles of Confederation. However, they ended up writing a brand new constitution that we still have to this day. And since we're getting ready to start this scholar venture, what better way to go on a scholar venture than with my favorite adventure partner ever?
Best adventure partner ever.
Hey! Hey, scholars!
The first part of the Constitution is the Preamble, or the introduction. It starts with those famous 3 words, "We the people."
By definition, a preamble is an introduction or preliminary statement. I like to think of it as the Constitution's thesis statement. It's important that we also take notice with how the preamble starts, with that very powerful word, we. This was a constitution written by the people and for the people. While this may seem ordinary to us, it was a very radical idea at the time. Many governments of the time were created and handed down to the people. Kings and queens were born into their job, not chosen by the people. Now, the preamble states 6 different purposes of government. The first is to form a more perfect union. Remember, under the Articles of Confederation, there was no strong national government to unify the states. The Constitution had to fix that. The Constitution also establishes justice by creating a court system and ensures that all citizens are kept safe, healthy, and free. Now, let's go see what Article 1 has in store for us.
After the Preamble comes the 7 articles of the Constitution, each detailing different powers of the Constitution and our government. The first one, Article 1, deals with Congress. Article 1 says, all legislative powers herein granted shall be vested in a Congress of the United States, which shall consist of a Senate and a House of Representatives.
Article 1 is the longest section of the Constitution. It gives Congress the authority to make laws. Article 1 also details the powers of Congress and sets the requirements for holding office. The United States Congress is bicameral because it has 2 chambers, the House of Representatives and the Senate. The difference between the 2 are also explained in Article 1. Now, let's continue this scholar adventure and head to the hub of the executive branch, the White House.
Just down the road from Congress on Pennsylvania Avenue, we have the home of the executive branch in Article 2. Article 2 says, the executive power shall be vested in a President of the United States of America, who gets to live right here.
Article 2 is not as long as Article 1, but it has a very similar purpose. However, Instead of giving authority to Congress to make laws, it gives the President and Vice President the power to execute or enforce laws. Similar to Article 1, Article 2 details many of the powers of the President, sets the requirements for holding office, and also explains how the President is elected through the Electoral College. Now, let's wrap up this adventure and head to the hub of Article 3, the United States Supreme Court. And if you remember from the map, it's going to take us right back to where we started, since it's right around the corner from Congress.
All right, so our third branch of government and the third article in the Constitution is all about the judicial branch. And judicial power of the United States shall be vested in one Supreme Court, and in such inferior courts as the Congress may from time to time ordain and establish.
Article 3 not only gives judicial power to a Supreme Court, it also gives Congress the power to create lower courts. As you can see, it's significantly shorter than the other two articles we discussed and visited. Unlike the other two articles, the Constitution does not outline the requirements for judges to hold office. Instead, they have life terms. And when you read Article 3, you'll even notice that the biggest power of the Supreme Court to declare laws unconstitutional isn't in the document. The court established it themselves by doing it for the first time.
So now that we looked at the preamble and the first three articles of the Constitution that outline our three branches, let's look at Articles 4, 5, 6, and 7.
Article 4 is the section of the Constitution that talks about states. It outlines the responsibilities of states, as well as the responsibilities the federal government has to the states. It explains the process of adding new states. Article 5 details how amendments or changes to the Constitution can be made. Nothing in the Constitution can be taken out of the document. Instead, changes have to be made by adding an amendment. So far, there have been 27 amendments to the Constitution, and the first 10 are called the Bill of Rights. Article 6 declares that the Constitution is the supreme or highest law of the land. And finally, Article 7 is the ratification or approval of the Constitution. I had so much fun filming the Scholarcation and riding my bike to the 3 different branches of government in Washington, D.C. I hope you're inspired to take the same trip, and I hope you have as much fun as me. I also hope you're inspired to read the Constitution for yourself and actually look through those different articles, those different sections of the Constitution, and see exactly what our government says. But also take notice of all the things that are not in the Constitution, but that has evolved historically. Political parties, not in the Constitution, minority and majority whips and leaders, not in the Constitution. A lot of things aren't there, but has evolved as we have grown as a country. If you want to check that out, I'll put a link to the Constitution, as well as a link to reading the Constitution in plain English that has a little bit easier vocabulary to help you understand. Stay tuned for more videos where I'll take a more in-depth look on Congress, Supreme Court, and the executive branch. So go be inspired to have your own Scholarcation. Because when you travel, you learn. And when you learn, you'll want to travel more. See you next time.
Ready? Scholarcation.
Hydration!